Welcome everyone to another Spooky2 tutorial. My name is Brad Johnson, and tonight we are going to be talking about the Spooky2 Scalar. I'm going to be introducing you to the Spooky2 Scalar as a whole, what it is, what its technology does. I'm going to be covering the setup and the tuning for the Spooky2 Scalar system. I'm also going to be talking about the four different modes of delivery, obviously the pure scalar, the rifing scalar, the molecular scalar, and as always, the use of the harmony, which is the audio modulations. So we'll talk about all four of those tonight. I'm also going to kind of present to you guys some information about imprinting with the Spooky2 Scalar and the things that I've learned over the last several years of using these types of systems. We're also going to talk about common case treatments, most common, not a whole bunch, but for the most case, these are the most relevant things that you'll use this type of system for with regards to trying to address your health needs. And again, at the very end, I'm going to talk about common troubleshooting and a little bit with regards to kind of some things that I've been experimenting with regards to the Spooky2 system, and I've been seeing some tremendous results with. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Again, I am Bradley Johnson. I'm a holistic frequency practitioner based out of Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. I have a 16-year background in radio frequency engineering and waveform modulation specializations. I am a gold certified trainer and have been for Spooky2 for the last 3+ years. And as you can see, openly joke about winning the genetic lottery as a child because the fact that I suffered from so many issues, most of them in which I've used the Spooky2 systems to actually help address and completely remove altogether using these things in red. And even the type 1 diabetes issues here, I'll even touch base on highlights and updates on those as to things and progressions that I've recognized in using these systems. However, I am going to be covering a lot of information tonight relative to the scalar itself. So if I don't happen to get to one of your questions or you'd have any other additional questions or would like any additional training, you're welcome to shoot me an email at the email address you see down here on the corner of the screen. Also welcome to join my Telegram if you'd like to ask any open questions relative to rifing or radio frequencies in general. And you're more than happy to welcome to join the channel. So how did all the scalar technology start? So we're going to go back to the early 1800s. Actually, people often attribute the technology to being a scalar technology, coming from Nikola Tesla. Unfortunately, Tesla really didn't, wasn't behind everything. Really, this was Maxwell who was the original genius behind the potentials of what scalar energies have the potential of doing. And this was in the early 1860s. As you fast forward a little bit, then we start getting into Tesla, the Serbian American, who I credit as being the most intelligent individual. Obviously, as you can tell from the wall behind me, I'm a super fan of Tesla. Tesla brought the technology to life with regards to real, demonstration with regards to its existence of the technology. So much so that this ultimately forced Einstein to have to publish documentation supporting the scalar energy waves applied to gravitational fields. But for the most part, what we're talking about here is the convergence of two identical electromagnetic frequencies from two opposite directions produce scalar energy. So a transmitter and a receiver that normally one wave will be sent, the other wave will be sent back, and the two waves will cancel each other out. So this is exactly what we're talking about. In an electromagnetic wave, from a waveform perspective, you're looking at two variables of the wave. The waveform here that you're seeing in purple is going to represent the electric field of the waveform itself. However, the red that you're seeing here in the waveform represents the magnetic field, and combined together, these represent an electromagnetic wave. Now, the point-to-point or peak-to-peak that you see here are what we'd identify as the wavelength. And in this particular case, you guys can see this is a sine wave type of delivery. But if you had a transmitter and a receiver, similar to what you see here, a transmitter and a receiver, then when these two are phased to each other, this is the exact reason why when you're wearing something like noise canceling earphones, the two are, you don't hear anything outside of them because they're phased to each other. And so you hear everything perfectly clear in between the two headsets, but nothing outside of them. Similarly, what most people don't realize is that you can also heal and use these particular things with regards to using resonance. So if you're playing a specific healing frequency, you can, as you see here, put your wrist or put your ankle, or if you had migraines, you could put on migraine music and try to help alleviate those symptoms from a resonance perspective of the wave cancellations happening between the transmitter and the receiver. So as we move down to what the Spooky2 product brings into this game, Spooky2 is going to give you two cases. These cases are going to come with the link cable, the BNC cable that is used for connecting the transmitter device to the actual to the generator. And we're also going to be talking about the power cord. Now, the nice thing about this particular setup is that they all come actually tucked into the case themselves. Very neat and compact. Makes it very easy with regards to being able to break them down and set them up and or move them from place to place. Now, as we go through the presentation tonight, I'm going to be talking about both the transmitter, as you see I've labeled here with the T, and the receiver, which I've labeled with the R. Both cases look fairly similar, as you see here, but there are small changes of the two, and I'm going to cover those with you next. However, the unique thing, then, the most unique thing about the Spooky2 Scalar is this is one of the very few products on the market that it's actually going to combine both the technologies behind Rife and Tesla into the same device and product. But not only that, this particular version of Scalar is offered in 4 different methods of delivery. So as I mentioned before, when you get the two cases, you're going to be presented with the Scalar transmitter and the Scalar receiver. Now, the transmitter, when you take it out, is going to look identical to this, where we talked about before. You'll have a BNC input for bringing frequencies in. You'll have your link cable on both the transmitter and your link cable on the receiver side, and the 2 coils, one coil here, one coil here. Now, again, this light right here that says LED will not appear red when you first get it and first turn it on. But as you tune this frequency, and when we get into the tuning of this is where you will see the red LED appear on the transmitter side of the case itself. So let's talk about setting them up and actually tuning them specifically. So generally, when you're setting up the Scalar cases, they need to be aligned with the case lids facing each other with a minimum distance of at least 6 feet apart. And the primary reason behind the 6 feet is that because you have a lot of EMF, roughly about a foot or so coming off of the lid of the case as before the waves cancel on each lid. So if you've got roughly a foot, let's just say 2 feet coming off of each lid, and the width of your shoulders is roughly 2 feet, then the minimum distance for Scalar should be a minimum of 6 feet. However, the uniqueness about Scalar fields, they're not set to minimums. Like, you can actually increase them larger and more bigger and more scaled up, even the size of the entire office or a building or an entire house if you'd like. However, a couple things that you'll see here is that one, I use and set mine on these little wooden tray tables. This is not something that you have to have by any means, but it's a convenient factor for me because I can fold them up and move them and adjust them to whatever length of whatever setup that I'm using with the Scalar for whatever environment that I'm in. And that's really the most important thing with regards to your environment, is that there have been other presentations that even I've done out in the past where I've said tune to this or tune to that, and really what it comes down to is each individual person's environment is going to tune differently. So when you get a setup like this, what's going to work best is you need to try to set up and adjust at 1 megahertz or a different megahertz or different ones to try to tune and see where you're going to have the strongest field per your environment. So as you see here in mine, okay, what I mean by this is that the distance and length that you're setting these up will vary the size of the field. So these are the kind of arrangements that if you have roughly a 6-foot distance, then you're going to create roughly a 3-foot scalar bubble that is roughly the size of a football shape between the two cases. Whereas if you extend the link between these two to a 10-foot distance, now we're talking about a 5-foot kind of football bubble. So you can increase the size depending upon the length in which you spread out the two cases, as long as your link cable is still connected between the two. Okay, so now we kind of talked a little bit about the tuning earlier. So now initially when you turn this on, as I mentioned, the red LED will not actually be displayed right here. You won't actually see it, but it will read 8 megahertz when it first starts. So from this perspective, you'll start counter tuning it counterclockwise, and once you do, this light will then start to glow brighter and brighter and brighter. And once it hits its brightest point is generally the point where you're going to stop tuning. Now, the key in this is if you are tuning to a specific number, like you want to tune to 5.5 or 4 or 5.0 or any number like that, and you accidentally overtune, it's better to turn off the scalar and then turn it back on and retune to your number than it is to tune past and then try to tune back up. That's a mistake. So Once you hit your number for where you feel is going to be your strongest field, then we're going to walk around to the receiver and actually press the link light, or what is this kind of confirmation light. Now, once this light lights up like this is going to show you, yeah, I have a field present between the two cases. We are linked and ready to go. You have a scalar energy field active and set up. However, what I try to remind people is make sure you turn the light off, because this thing will burn out. And then once you do that, you have no way of confirming whether or not your field is actually set up or not. So make sure that you use it as a confirmation. However, we'll talk a little bit later with regards to troubleshooting and doing things like that. This is also a way of you can make sure that how these cases are, make sure that they're aligned correctly with the lids facing each other or tilted correctly, so that you are linking and are getting a strong light. Now, I mentioned earlier about tuning to your environment, and that's exactly what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So when I'm tuning my Spooky2 Scalar in my environment, my brightest link light is at 4.2 megahertz. But that's not the point where I get the brightest link on the transmitter side. As you see here, I've taken 3 different photos of 3 different megahertz intensities from highest to lowest, where at 6 megahertz, it's relatively bright, and 4.2, it's really bright, it's super bright. But at 3.7, I've tuned too far, and you can see the intensity is now back down again. So you'll want to vary the different tune settings to try to find which is going to link the best setting for you. Now, as I mentioned before, please make sure that you're cautious with regards to introducing yourself into Scalar and what strengths you're tuning at, because even though we may tune initially at, let's say, 5.5 or 5.25 megahertz on the transmitter side, if you tune to a lower link light, the link light should be brighter, as you see here. If you tuned at 6, it would indicate like this, whereas if you tuned at, say, 4.2, it should indicate like this. But as I mentioned before, if you overtune, then the intensity goes back down, and this is not what we're looking for. The stronger this link light is, the stronger the proof of field that you have there. So find the sweet spot in your environment that works best and tune to that when you're setting it up. Okay, so the first method of delivery with the Spooky2 Scalar is the simplest and the easiest method of delivery. It's simple, pure scalar energy. This is just a simple matter of setting up the 2 cases, the distance that you feel comfortable with, plugging it into the wall, turning it on, and tuning it. And once you have the cases tuned, similar to what we just talked about per your environment, then all you have to do is put yourself in between the 2 scalar cases and relax. This will automatically start accelerating your body's natural ability to repair itself. So the more that you're in this field, again, I would kind of caution you, as this is an amplified method of delivery. It is a healing, method of delivery. However, it is an amplifier. So when you're spending lots of time in this, anytime I'm introducing someone to Scalar for the first time, I always advise them to be aware of the fact that scalar energy has a tendency to kind of travel with you. So even though you may only sit in it for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes or a certain period of time, as you get up and go on about your day, the energy of that session may stay with you. So be cautious of that until your body starts becoming comfortable with regards to how much time it takes and how your body's going to respond. The reason why I'm telling you this is because a lot of people often who try to get something like this, let's say for a sleeping issue or something like that, which we'll talk about later, you start jumping into this thing night 1 and sleeping, and like I said, your body is going to try to tell you differently with regards to how you progress when you sleep so many nights in it. And you have to be able to respond to recognize when too much is too much, because you are sleeping in an active energy field that's tuned to itself. So pure energy, simplest, easiest thing to do, tune it, simply put yourself in the middle of it, and we are good to go. Rifing frequencies. Now, this is again where we start to kind of teeter with the technologies with regards to already having a purely tuned scalar field, and now we're introducing a specific rifing frequency. Now, I try to remind clients that when I'm having people come over and do scalar sessions on an average, the normal scalar session, 9 out of 10 of those sessions will be just a regular pure scalar session tuned to a specific megahertz, no frequency needed whatsoever. However, if an individual has a specific issue or case where the use or adding of a frequency would benefit their session, then by all means, I would save that particular frequency into the memory of a Gen X or a Gen X Pro system, and then pipe it from there directly into the transmitter as they were running their scalar session. Now, on average, the sessions that I'm running are anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes, sometimes 15 to 20 minutes, depending upon the sessions and really what we're addressing. But 90% of the work is pure scalar energy. But if and when I'm piping in frequencies, I have a specific Gen X Pro, my Gen X Pro, that I use specifically just for saving programs like meditation induction and chakra balancing and the things that go beneficial for use inside a scalar field. Not for use of every client, but for kind of if and when I need them, when clients show up that do actually need them, I already have them saved into the memory of the Gen X Pro. However, just as you can see here on the screen, the XM generator can also be used, but you do need to be aware of the fact, obviously, with hooked up to the XM generator, that you're going to need to be connected to the Spooky2 software and a laptop. So we're going to have to make sure that all that is kind of clear of your field as we set it up, but it is a possibility of bringing in frequencies from the Spooky2 software using an XM generator as well as a Gen X or Gen X Pro. Okay, molecular scalar is our next mode of delivery with regards to the Spooky2 Scalar. Now, what this is going to allow us to do is take the receiver case, as you see here labeled with the R, and introduce things like our essential oils and our herbal solutions, even medications and or even prescription drugs. You essentially set these onto the small circular coil here that you see in the picture, and then it will draw the molecular effects of whatever you set onto the coil into the field of your scalar, pure energy scalar field that we already have tuned and set up. So again, this is a wonderful method of introducing drugs and medications without actually having to physically take or introduce them into your body. I've done this with multiple different clients and multiple different people with regards to the way of being able to kind of trick the brain into taking only what it needs without introducing more. It's a wonderful mechanism to kind of, again, we'll look at some of the kind of top common uses cases for treatments and things like that with this type of method of delivery. But the ability to say that, oh, I've got a migraine or a headache or something like that coming on, and then take a Tylenol or a specific medication and place that on the receiver and then sit between the two cases for a matter of minutes and alleviate the headache and or migraine symptoms that were coming on, regardless of what you were going to do anyway, symptoms to be able to go away without you having to physically take those types of medicines is a wonderful solution with regards to. I always try to remind people that, like, if you have a Spooky2 scalar and any types of medications, it's like the equivalency of being your own frequency apothecary, because you should never need to take the medications again. You can simply introduce them one by one as needed on the receiver of your scalar sessions. Okay, the fourth modulation that we are introducing you to here with regards to how the Spooky2 scalar can be introduced is called the Spooky2 Harmony. So the Harmony is an accessory device that is attached directly to the receiver side. Now, once it's attached, then you run this cable right here to your accessory or whatever means that you're using to pipe in the devices, whether you're using your phone or your MP3 player or an old school CD player or an 8-track, just whatever devices that you guys have out there that you're piping out of. You can simply connect out from them and then pipe in the audio modulations into your pure energy scalar field, again allowing you to listen to healing beats or specific meditation music as you're sitting in between the two scalar fields. Excuse me, the two scalar cases. Now, the unique thing about the scalar harmony is that it doesn't actually impede your ability to introduce molecular weights as well. So in this instance, that you see an essential oil here on the case as well, you can introduce those as well because there's a simple cutout already in place. So if you're doing the harmony and medications and or essential oils or anything like that, you can actually combine those modulations simply because of the way that this accessory is built. Okay, let's slow this down a little bit and talk a little bit about scalar imprinting. I have been using Scalar for a number of years now with regards to imprinting my home water systems. I use them for a lot of my plants, and I'm a very, very, very huge fan of being able to set water quantities onto the transmitter side and imprint the energies of my scalar session and the frequencies and or any molecular modulations that I'm piping into that scalar session into that crystalline structure of that water. So a lot of times people often have questions with regards to what goes on what case. So I tried to lay that out in the presentation here today so that you can kind of see that whether you're looking at the transmitter or you're looking at the receiver, this should help you start to identify which goes where with regards to what gets placed where. So obviously, when you're imprinting, all we have to do is set the water on the transmitter side, because the transmitter side is the imprinting coil with regards to imprinting the frequencies and or to the scalar energy, and or if you're sitting between the cases, even your DNA into that water or into that crystalline structure. So things like frequencies and or distilled water solutions and or even your DNA. We talked earlier, there was a question about the ability to take one of your DNA samples, like a fingernail or something like that, setting that on the transmitter of the Spooky2 Scalar, and then turning the Spooky2 Scalar into a giant remote and using quantum to then have all the effects of what's happening in your scalar session sent to that individual's fingernail via quantum. So DNA can be put onto the small coil of the transmitter side. Whereas on the receiver side is like the receiving door of a warehouse. Like anything that you want to add to or to enhance, has to come through the receiving side. So for example, if we want to add in harmony, if we're doing audio modulations, that's going to be added to the receiving side. If we're adding in essential oils or anything beneficial that we want to enhance the effectiveness of our already pure tuned scalar field, that gets added onto the receiver side. Same thing with medications, Tylenol. Again, I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit here with regards to some of the medications that I use specifically and have seen tremendous results with regards to not actually having to take any of these medications anymore because of the use of the Spooky2 system. Okay, so what are some of the most common treatment methods for the Spooky2 scalar? So first off, my number one favorite thing to address with this thing is brain fog. Individual brain fog. Often when you have the hecticness of your day, I often use this type of understanding when you're sitting in the scalar as a dry erase board. When you're walking around throughout the course of the day and you're interacting with frequencies and different energies and things like that, your dry erase board is taking on different bits of information and frequencies and energies, and you're just compiling it up and compiling it up until so much so that you get to a point where you do feel like your cognitive ability to think and process information is being impaired, giving you what some of us refer to as brain fog. And so the ability to sit down in between the tuned scalar field, just a pure scalar energy field, and remove the hecticness of all that craziness that the world has kind of brought you to get you to that point in the day. This is like the equivalency of a dry erase marker. Now we're just erasing all the markers off the board and we're just cleaning everything off with an eraser and allowing you a kind of open path for your thoughts and what you're trying to focus on. This is again wonderful for things like meditation sessions where you're trying to focus on specific things or get your focus points to guide to a specific area. This particular system is wonderful for enhancing that with regards to removing some of the distractions of the environments of the worlds that we commonly live in, regardless if this is in work environments or home environments. So insomnia is the second one with regards to the most common thing that people address. We talked a little bit about kind of learning how to. And as I would remind everybody, please make sure that you take caution when you're using something like this. It is an energy amplifier. So generally when people get this thing, you start slowly and work your way up by doing certain, time sessions. I can't give you like this much time per this individual because this is going to vary from person to person, particularly depending upon how sensitive that you are to the energies coming from the scalar itself. So try it, understand and see how your body responds to it, but also start to recognize when your body is giving you signs and symptoms to say, hey, we need to turn this off for a day because we've been in it for too long. And that's generally what happens when you're running sleeping programs in it, because you're introducing this for multiple hours. You will eventually start getting better sleep. And then we have the ability to introduce programs to really start helping the things like insomnia. However, there may come a night, 3 or 4 nights in, where for the first time in several nights, you've actually had decent, really good quality sleep, and you're feeling like you're starting to make some headway, and then all of a sudden you can't sleep and you're tossing and turning, and this is your body telling you, hey, your body's fully charged up, man. Turn that scalar off for a day or so until you come back down, and then once you get tired again, then just retune and get back in, and you'll have wonderful quality sleep again. But you do have to start listening to what your body is telling you as you're spending more and more and more time in this, because the more time you spend in it, there will come points and times where, again, I've been in them for so long where my body just gets irritated telling me it's time to get out of it, or turn it off for a little while. And so listen to what your body is telling you with regards to the signs and follow accordingly. Cellular rejuvenation. On average, I use the Spooky2 Scalar 6 days a week, simply for helping people regenerate their cellular cells inside their body. We have a pretty interesting protocol where we're running plasma sweeps for different individuals, and we're integrating them in with different therapies like contrast therapy with sauna and cold plunge. But then, as they come out of that cold plunge, then I'm putting them into a scalar field with a zero gravity massage chair, and I'm letting them just relax and regenerate for about a 15-minute period of time. And on average, as I mentioned before, I tune relatively low per the energy in my environment. And so when I'm tuning on average with regards to the cellular rejuvenation sessions, a simple 15-minute session of something like this, I would say on average, 8 out of 10 individuals can fall asleep in a 15-minute period of time when you're doing something like this, just because you're the way you tune it and how the chair integrates in with regards to just being able to sit back and relax and not have any concerns. Again, ideal and perfect for things like meditation and prayer, things that you really want to focus on. A lot of the times when I'm struggling with anything from a thought or clarity of thought perspective, like how am I going to accomplish this, or where am I going to go to get something like this resolved, I simply get in the scalar, because the scalar has a tendency of opening pathways that you didn't think of or that were blocked, again, similar to like the brain fog, like we talked about earlier, where you would never have thought about those before. And so now it gets to a point where I don't actually get into my scalar without having a little notepad next to me, because of what I'm going to think of, or the ideas and the potentials of the things of where my mind is going to take me once I get in it. So having something that I can actually take notes on and then track back as I come out, really tends to help with regards to me setting out stuff that I was struggling with clearly prior to going into the session, and then having a clear solution as I came out of. All right, let's take a little bit closer look with regards to some of these things like our addiction and our medications. So medications, some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but I have actually successfully removed myself completely from my type 2 long-lasting insulin. I've done that through the use of the Spooky2 Scalar by taking a small vial like this and introducing my fast-acting insulin into this vial. I did have to do trial runs with this, where I started by doing like 4 units and 5 units and 10 units, and trying to find where I could put this on that would kind of keep me balanced with regards to my glucose readings throughout the course of the night. But for me, what I found is that by only using 7 units of my aspart insulin, if I put 7 units into here and then I simply remove the cork, I can set that onto the scalar, and it will keep my blood glucose levels almost through the course of the entire night with very little fluctuation, maybe 20 points or so, with regards to it going through the entire course of the night. Now, furthermore, since I've started having so much better regulation of my type 1 diabetes, my A1C numbers are all coming back down in check, my C-peptide numbers are coming back online. I've actually had specific full days where my glucose numbers actually barely track up a couple points or down a couple points with no fluctuations. So things are trending better and better and better, and I am going to continue to travel on with regards to using frequencies to try to successfully address my type 1 diabetes. But these are the steps that I've used with the Spooky2 Scalar with regards to the integration of certain things, like in my case, insulin and other types of medications, to successfully, again, how wonderful it was for me to be able to tell my doctor that I no longer needed a long-lasting insulin. Like the look on his face was like, yeah, right. It's like I'm not joking. Like I've regulated myself off of the need for the requirement for it. So from a diabetic who has required insulin since he was 4 years old, to work yourself off of the need to try to no longer need 2 types of insulins or 2 trips to the pharmacy every month, it was a much a well-needed solution for something as easy as simply introducing my fast-acting insulin onto my scalar sessions while I slept at night. Addictions. So the Spooky2, absolutely amazing with regards to its potential with regards to addressing addictions. However, I need you guys to be aware of the word that I just used there, potential. And the reason why it's a potential is because I always warn people when we're talking about addictions and you hear stories about how amazing and how incredible and beneficial the scalar system can be, there's always going to be this one individual in your mind that you are like, oh man, this would be so good for this individual. And your thought with regards to how it would benefit them and how they could do this and how it could change their lives or how it could correct certain things that they're struggling with may be the case, but unfortunately, what I have come to learn with regards to trying is that you cannot help anybody that has not physically and psychologically decided that they are willing to help themselves. And this is most relevant when you're talking and dealing with issues around addiction. Um, Someone who has not physically decided that they're not willing um, to physically step away from something, no frequency is going to just be able to turn on and make them change their mind. They've physically not allowed anything to happen because they've already convinced themselves that it won't. So there is a physical line in the sand there that you have to understand that no matter what you do or how beneficial you want it to be, you'll never drag them over that line. And so having them their willingness and their understanding of saying, I've tried that, I failed here, I can't do this, I need help somewhere else, and the willingness to step over that line, to try this, to give it a shot, to see what you have to potentially lose, that willingness is what has to be present with regards to the ability to start coming off of a drug addiction. However, the use of these types of systems is not just going to get you there. And what I mean by that is that several years ago in 2021, 2022, I helped a 15-year morphine addict successfully kick her habit of morphine sulfate. This was the result of a car accident that happened 15 years ago. And unfortunately, her body had been addicted to morphine for so long that if she went for any time less than a 2-hour window where her body wasn't medicated on it, then she was hurting. She, for as young as she was, it had demobilized her. She was walking with a cane. She was completely, day in and day out suffering. And so when we started introducing Spooky2 frequencies, whether it was with remote or the methods of imprinting or scalar, we started by also working out a tapering routine. And that's kind of what you're seeing here is when we first met, she was taking, let's say, 5, prescription medications a day. And so knowing that her goal was to get completely off of the medications, in addition to us starting and running remote-based programming for things like morphine sulfate and endorphin release, we also ran programs on remote for withdrawal symptoms, while we also tried to taper down what her body was physically taking. So if she was comfortable taking 5 medications, and I say comfortable just because that's not really a way of living, but now we're going to start taking 4 medications a day. And after a certain period of time, then we're going to start taking 3 medications a day. And after a certain period of time, we're going to work down medications a day. And we're going to continue to work your tapering down so that your body's requirement of what you need should be diminishing down the more that the frequencies run and the more that those frequencies are being introduced to yourself and to your body. And so eventually there will come a point in a time where the two cross with regards to your tapering, your body's ability to let go of the addiction of the drug itself, and the frequencies kind of helping you continue to get along with regards to still kind of tricking the brain into believing that you've taken enough to get by without having to physically introduce it into the body. So as I mentioned before, you can have amazing success with addictions, but it all starts with the willingness to want to see and accept change and using frequencies to make that change happen in your body. But as me and my client worked our way down from 2 and then to 1 medication, in order to get her free, we had to use the scalar. And what we would do actually imprint about 6 or 7 of these little 30 milliliter distilled water solutions. And I would put them on the transmitter side. We would take one of her morphine sulfates and put that onto the receiver side. And then she would simply sit between the cases for about, sometimes about 20 minutes. Sometimes it would take 30 minutes. A different day, would take different times. And in addition to that, we're piping in frequencies for morphine sulfate and for endorphin release. So as we're doing all these sessions, these would only take about 20 or 30 minutes for her body to trigger and realize, oh, I have an actual endorphin release from introducing that morphine sulfate without actually taking the morphine sulfate. So she would get up, put the medication back into her baggie and pocket, and would take the 6 or 7 distilled water solutions and be on her way. Now, as a withdrawal symptom would appear throughout the course of a day, which would still happen as we're working our way off of taking these drugs that she had been taking for years, as a withdrawal symptom would appear, she would simply take the top off that distilled water and drink it, and that would negate those symptoms long enough for her to get back to me to do the scalar session the next day. So after 17 consecutive days of doing this, she was successfully no longer addicted to morphine after a 15-year addiction. But again, would not have been possible, particularly going and transitioning from 1 to 0 pills without the use of something like the Spooky2 Scalar. So the moment that we successfully resolved and got her down to 0, she bought a Spooky2 Scalar, and like I said, her life is completely different. I often don't tell people this, but that individual, she kind of disappeared on me for a little while, and I stopped hearing from her, which again I just assumed was great news. And one afternoon, I was happening to be doing a Zoom call, and I got a knock on my front door. And as anyone who knows me, I have multiple dogs, so knocks on doors with dogs in the house is chaos. And so I had to pause the Zoom session and go get the door. When I opened the door, it was my client that I helped with the addiction. And she looked like 25 years younger in life, man. Like, it was incredible. Like, she had a different aura about her, her glow, her skin. Like, she wasn't even walking with a cane. Like, she just looked like the life had been breathed back into her. And so she stopped back in to tell me that she was moving back to her home state, and how grateful she was. And she gave me a hug. And when she hugged me, it made the hair on my arm stand up like it is right now. But that was pretty much one of the last times I ever saw her. But like, once she kind of understood and knew how she could get by and how she could get herself through her situation and life with this device, again, off she went. Go take back your life again. All right, let's talk about some of the most common troubleshooting with this device. A lot of the times when people are trying to set up a field, you're either setting up the field too small, you're setting up the field too big, and or we're misaligning some of the cases. This often is the case, like I said, obviously not everyone's going to have those dinner tray tables that I referenced earlier in the presentation, but you will need to find something that's similar height, because the lids are not going to adjust from, say, something like up on a table and down on the floor. So we want to make sure that we have the same height for both the transmitter and the receiver, but you will have some play in the lids. So if you're not getting a very solid link light, then adjust or play with the lids and make sure that they're angled correctly so that the field is actually, confirming and showing that it's got a solid field here. One of the things that commonly happens is people will set up this awesome and unique scalar field in a different environment, and they'll run their link cable, and then they go to test the link and nothing happens. And they can understand it's not like it's super far spread out, but what they've done is let's assume that they used the super long link cable here in a very small environment, and they've looped the coil over multiple times, or they didn't have a straight run between the two cases. This type of issue with how the link cable is ran will pull away from the field, and which is causing the issue. So when we shorten the actual link cable because she was using a shorter field, all of a sudden linked perfectly, had a solid strong field, no problem, everything was great. So the way that you run that link cable, make sure that if you're not tuning, that you're adjusting how you're running that. We've got it as straight as possible, and that we don't have any loops or coils in it anywhere, and that we're drawing it out to the field length that you want, and then kind of removing that link cable so that it's not causing any type of distractions or issues with regards to being trip hazard and things like that if it is on the floor. Again, we've also talked about kind of tuning it and making sure that like if you're tuning at a 5 megahertz field, try tuning at a 4 megahertz field and see the difference in what the field does and what the difference in the scalar field reaction does when you put yourself into the field. So these are all kind of ways that you're kind of most common for troubleshooting with this. But again, obviously, there's always going to be unique things that you'll come across when you're using a system like this. So by all means, if you happen to have any additional questions, or you're not sure about troubleshooting or anything like that, or something's not working correctly, you always have a Spooky2 support ticket that you can open, or you're welcome to send me an email. I'm more than happy to help people with regards to addressing issues and things that I've seen with regards to not only using these, but helping repair them as well. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you guys about something really unique that I introduced this to my in-person seminar back in March. And the way we set this up is area where we were talking and doing all the presentation, but in the room behind us, I actually set up quad scalars. So quad scalars was done by introducing, similarly like you saw before with the little wooden tray tables, I just set up 4 of them. Only in this room, this was about a 50 by 50 foot room. So I simply stretched them out to the 4 corners and ran ginormous link cables between the two. And almost commonly through the course of the presentation on that second day, when we were talking about these types of modality approaches, people could tell me that they could feel the energies actually coming through the back wall from the quad scalar in the room behind us. So a lot of times people talk about the use of adding different types of scalar. What I try to tell you is that quad scalars can be amazingly powerful. Like I set these up for family events and things like that, or when we're going places where one individual has a scalar and I have to bring my scalar. You set up both scalars, like for again, like any type of imagine having Thanksgiving with the entire family or friends or something like that, and the entire house in multiple directions is covered in scalar. Uh, Again, not a necessity, but when certain people have enjoyed the benefit of scalar and what it can do for so many years, sometimes you want to think of what more can you do. So the ability to say, take, another set of these, cross those two fields over will enhance the effectiveness of what you're noticing and experiencing from the two fields as they cross over. So again, we did this in March for everybody that came into the in-person session, and they loved it with regard step into the room and being able to notice how powerful and how strong the two fields were as they crossed over each other. I'm going to try to open it up to Q&A to try to get any questions answered from tonight's presentation. We'll see where we go. Okay. Jennifer asks, can from skin and place in the remote and then run a sweep and kill on flukes in the body. Technically you can, but that's technically from a remote perspective, like that's more targeted approach. With Scalar tonight, we're talking about healing modality approach. So that would be a little bit different. You wouldn't target specific things. Boop, boop. Okay, so Rich here is asking about the Gen X Pro and how he uses it most every day and is wondering about what he's missing out with regards to not having a scalar system. So remember, the means of delivering the frequencies are done by the generator. It doesn't matter if it's the Gen X Pro or if it's just the XM generator, but the scalar is the method of delivering the frequencies out of the database. So the generator is just the means for introducing those frequencies. Doesn't matter which generator you're using to do that, but the scalar is an amplified delivery of healing modality approaches. So you can do healing on remote, you can work your way up and do healing on contact with regards to TENS pads or hand cylinders. You can do healing with PEMF coil, but amplified healing is going to be scalar, so as you work your way up in intensity with regards to the delivery, that's what you're talking about. And that's ultimately what we're talking about with regards to you're missing out on that amplified delivery. It says, how many medications or supplements can be placed on the receiver at one time? As many as you have. Honestly, like I have, when I tend to have more than one medications, if I'm not using just insulin or something else, then what I do is I take a shot glass and I just combine all of them into the shot glass, and then I put the shot glass right on. That way I don't have to have all the pills and the labels and the plastics and the things of all the bottles. I don't want all that in the field. I just want to introduce the pills specifically via shot glass into the field and then draw them in. So Annette here is asking with regards to the amount of water that you're using on the transmitter. Now that is a variable. Obviously, when you're imprinting with the Spooky2 Scalar, the amount of water that you have on the transmitter side will determine how long it's going to take. Clearly, if you have something that's 30 milliliters in size, it's going to imprint much faster than something that's, say, a gallon in size, So the more water quantity that you have, the longer it's going to take. But in most instances, you can't really overdo it with regards to imprinting. So I simply put it on and just let it run. Particularly like with larger things, like I used to have a medication or a molecular weight that I just imprinted continuously for someone, and I just kept it in a half-gallon Pyrex container on the scalar. And if and when they needed some, then they just came and poured a glass of it, and I just topped it back off as needed. But it ran continuously all the time. It says, how often should you retune them? I retune them pretty frequently. Like I said, I let them be a stable part of my environment, but if I'm getting ready to spend multiple hours in it, like say sleeping in it and or again going to have a larger session or something like that in it, then I'm going to turn it off and retune it, make sure it's tuned ideally to my environment. And that's primarily because my environment changes frequently throughout the course of the day. Okay, Anonymous asks, when I'm putting a medication on Scalar, how do I make sure I don't overdose? Well, that's the unique thing about with Scalar. You don't have to run, you don't run risk of overdose or side effect. The body will only take exactly what it needs and nothing more. So you don't run risk of anything that the body doesn't need being introduced at a rate that the body can't handle. Now, with regards to how long it takes, as I mentioned before, like similar with the morphine client, it would take different times. Sometimes it would take about 20 minutes, sometimes it would take 30, sometimes 35 minutes. Again, I'm not really confident if that was breakfast related or what it was with regards to the timing, but it will vary from person to person. So spend some time in it, try to identify what timing works best with you with regards to when you feel the effectiveness of your medications. Okay, Jennifer says, I've ordered the extra long cable. Problem is, if I extend it inside the house when I'm not including miscellaneous. Okay, she's talking about or being worried about miscellaneous metals. So don't worry about metals. Metals aren't a problem in the scalar field. It's metallic metals, things that are have a magnetic field that are worrisome with regards to the link cable that's running between the two cases. Metal can be inside the field. Again, as I mentioned before, like I put my clients in a zero gravity massage chair. Definitely has metal in it, So uh but nothing metallic in it, and so stay away from the metallics, not necessarily the metal, and see if that works or see if that helps. Okay. Marilyn, let's just make sure that you're clear. With regards to tuning, as I mentioned before, if you have a specific set number in your head, like 4.2, 4.5, and you want to tune to that specific number, then you are welcome to turn it on and then tune directly down to that number and then walk over to the link side and press it and confirm your field. However, if, as I mentioned before, let's just assume that you have an animal or someone, barks or knocks at the door and the animal's barking, as you're tuning it, you're going down to 4.5 and you accidentally tune over to 4.3. Don't tune back up to 4.5. Simply turn it off and then retune back down to 4.5 and then confirm your link light again on the receiver side. Cellular rejuvenation will happen naturally just by tuning it. You don't even need a frequency populated in it. It'll naturally accelerate your body's ability to repair itself. Okay, with regards to weaning off of certain medications and certain dosage requirements and things like that, as I mentioned before, like when you introduce medications on the scalar, they're not going to be a one-to-one exchange in. And so that's why it takes extended periods of time and even multiple methods of delivery, like introducing the medication via scalar while imprinting that medication, or also running the molecular on a remote would be methods of how you could kind of have multiple approaches at trying to get yourself off of something that you have been using for multiple years. Okay. Anonymous asks or wants to know what you do when the tuning knob doesn't work. I would encourage you to turn it off and turn it back on and make sure that your knobs are and everything are displays are displaying the numbers correctly and that you see everything. As I mentioned, when you first turn it on, you should see 8 megahertz and then just tune counterclockwise from there until your light hits a certain brightness on the transmitter side and then confirm on the receiver. Okay, it says when you're using a scaler with a Gen X Pro with a program one running, once the program is done or it's timed out, is the scalar field just the regular field, or does it get the regular field? Does it get disconnected from the wires? No. Again, once you're piping the frequencies stop from the generator side, you're just back to pure scalar energy. We started from pure scalar, we added the rifing frequency in on top of that. So when that rifing frequency stops, we're just back to pure scalar again. How long do you imprint water for a medication? Anne asks. Is it different with each medication? It can vary, but as I mentioned before, like there's no over time for over imprinting. So you'll generally have two types of variables with regards to imprinting water into medications. One is going to be the frequency of the medication itself. So higher hertz frequencies imprint faster into water or crystalline structures. And two, as we talked about earlier, is the amount of water. So imprinting into smaller quantities of water and testing and understanding, oh, well, it'll take me a half hour to do something like 528 into 30 milliliters, but it'll take me 2 hours to do something like 528 in a half gallon of water. Understanding those timelines is what you'll want to do with regards to the understanding of how long it's going to take for each medication to be imprinted. But as I also said earlier, you're not going to overdo this. So the longer, the better. April, you're welcome to send me an email about that particular question, and I will be happy to have a session with you and explain to you how to do that. Okay. Jojo asks if it was dangerous to share the scalar field with anyone that has critical conditions. I have been sharing the scalar field with cancerous individuals and people with serious conditions for absolutely zero impact from that. Um, that may be a precaution or a worry with regards to certain individuals, but my understanding and how the transmission of disease happens from one cell to the next, I am of zero concern of being critically injured or transferred of any unhealthy cells from their body to mine. I do not know when I'm having my next in-person session. I will let you know when we figure that out. Use of cell phones or iPads in the field. Tim, excellent question. Okay, so when you set up the field, it's not going to damage the field when you introduce things like the cell phone or the iPad. However, these are EMF devices, and we don't generally want to introduce them into an EMF-free buffer zone. Like the whole point of creating and tuning the two fields is to remove these things. Now, there will be certain situations, like say, for example, tuning in the bedroom where you're not always going to be able to not have the phone charged in or locally or something like that, where it's going to be close to the field. And as I mentioned before, it won't damage your field. However, if you can avoid bringing things into the field like your laptop and your phone and your tablet and while you're watching TV, try to avoid those things while you're in the field. You wouldn't be able to configure them on different floors because you need them at the same height. So, whereas you could do them, for example, if you had a multi-floor building, you could do the first floor on one scalar field, the second floor on another scalar field, and the third on another scalar field, and you could tune all three floors, no problem, but you wouldn't be able to the third floor and connect everybody in between because of the height variance there. Andrew asks, is it okay to run scalar and plasma at the same time? No, it is not. The effectiveness of the plasma is so amplified and so strong that it will drown out the scalar field. So you can have them both in the same room, but you need to run one or the other and not both at the same time. Generally, like you kind of think about them as amplified deliveries as a teeter-totter effect. If you've done too much with the plasma, then you use the scalar to repair and so on forth. And based off of how you feel from the plasma sessions, then you use the scalar to kind of correct and right the ship with that regard. Rebecca wants to know how many generators I use for type 1 diabetes. I have several generators that I'm used for just that focus. I think I have at least 6 that are constantly running. Which generators do you use? Since I use all XM generators. Those are almost my go-to setups for anything. I'm a huge fan of the XM generator, and I have tons of them. So yes, I allocate a couple of them directly for my type 1 diabetes. Yes, more than one person can be in the same field or animals. Generally, what you'll find is that animals are drawn to the field. I often tell people, and I love it when we're doing scalar presentations around the holiday because I often get lots of Christmas cards from individuals where it's their bedroom and just their bed tuned with scalar and all their animals piled in on it. Because when you set up scalar in the house, animals are generally going to be drawn to it, and it is perfectly fine to be sharing the fields with them. As I mentioned before, animals will come and go as they as they need to in the field, but you will notice that particularly like as in my case, I have multiple dogs, and when I can't find the dogs or I can't hear them, generally they're probably back in scalar. Okay, so it says when I'm imprinting medicine or essential oils into a glass of water, would I then drink the whole glass of water, um, or just do a few sips at a time? Honestly, that's why I did 30 milliliter solutions because I found it was easier to consume the whole amount. Like if I did like an 8 liter, or something like that, or however many ounces of water, like that's a lot of water and the imprinting time and things like that. I wanted something that could be quick, easy, and I could notice the effectiveness. So 30 milliliters was my go-to for all of my timing studies. But again, come up with a size or a quantity that you're comfortable with and understand the timing. Now remember, like I also did freeze timing studies on all my imprinting. So I understood when I was freezing them and how they looked that they were definitely confirming that the frequencies were in those water. And so I felt comfortable with that size and that quantity with those frequencies. Yes, you can run biofeedback scans with Scalar. Scalar does offer the ability to hook up G1 and G2 to run biofeedback scanning as well. Stroke recovery, there are tons of programs that you can run, particularly for stroke recovery, for circulation, and even stroke, uh, you know, uh, post-stroke, with regards to frequency programs that via means of the Scalar will help kind of re-get you back on track with regards to someone who suffered a stroke. Okay, it says, do you prefer Scalar BFB over the Gen X Pro or vice versa? Okay, so generally, like I use the Gen X Pro just normally, like as I mentioned before, in roughly 90% of my applications, just the tuning of the pure scalar energy. Now that may be with a molecular weight or not, but it's not with a frequency. The only instances in which I introduce the frequencies with the Gen X Pro is when I need those certain situations and certain use cases, where it would be most beneficial while that scalar session was going on if a frequency for this particular individual or this particular event of what's going on in their life is present as well. But it's not really a either or, Michael, just so you know. Can two people together receive scalar treatment? Yes. There are lots of treatment rooms all over the country right now where multiple people are receiving multiple scalar sessions at all the same time. Oh, okay. Brad, you saying that he has an older scalar unit and that he doesn't actually have the link light. All he has is the coil, which is just a confirmation coil, and that's totally fine. That works just as well with regards to once you set it up, you place that receiver coil on there, and once that coil lights up, it's proof that yeah, it's running. But that's ultimately what you have to do if and when you have an older unit and or if um, your link light gets burned out. There are frequencies for iodine in the system. Yes, you can find them. Okay, it says my question is about water and about having too large a volume for the water breaking the scalar field. No. Again, you're placing that water on a coil, and that coil is being energized by the frequencies of the scalar field. You're not The size of the water is irrelevant, other than the amount of time that it's going to take to imprint. Okay, Gina, we talked about this before with regards to how much time you have to be in the scalar field for medication to be effective. It varies from person to person. Does it have to be distilled water? Anne asks. It does not have to be distilled water, but the reason why I use distilled water is because it has the least filtration requirements. Like it's the purest, it's the cleanest. You don't have any filtration issues. So like if you're imprinting a distilled water solution with a frequency and you're freezing that to confirm that it's imprinted, you shouldn't have any particulate filters in there or filtration issues or anything like that. It should be clean, and that's ultimately why I use distilled water. Okay, if someone is in a different city, can you use their fingernail on the scaler and it will still work for them? And yes, that is correct. Now you take that receiver, or excuse me, that fingernail, that DNA, and you place that on the transmitter side of your scalar session, and then all the energies happening inside that scalar session are then being sent to that transmitter coil. The moment that hits your DNA, regardless of where that individual is, that quantum is hitting that individual. So ultimately, like making the remote or the scalar like a giant remote when the DNA is placed onto the transmitter side. Adam, yes, with regards to um, the drop the same frequencies and drops that you're using throughout the consumption of things throughout the course of the day. Yes, again, the multiple approaches. Some people, like I said, do small amounts of it. Some people do a little bit in the morning. Some people do it constantly throughout the course of the day. Really just find an approach that works best for you with regards to how you're imprinting it into the distilled solution and then how you're getting that distilled solution into you. Outside frequencies do not affect the field, like Wi-Fi. In fact, the Wi-Fi and your other large types of fields that are generally present in the house are what you're tuning out. That's ultimately what accelerates the body's natural ability to repair itself, Larry. Okay, I've heard people ask this question before with regards to being able to place a photograph in the middle of a scalar field and someone feel the effects of that. The only time I've seen this actually occur and happen correctly is when the individual's DNA was taped to the back of the photograph. Now, I've also heard that the reason why that doesn't normally commonly work is because digital photographs in the digital world that we're all living in don't work. Like when you're using radionics and stuff like that, the photographs that individuals are using are generally like a light and dark capture, um, Polaroid type image, where they're freezing that moment directly onto the image of the film. That type of photo, I would believe, would have the ability to link back to an individual. But without having the DNA on a digital link, there's no way of connecting that image back to an individual. Just my personal opinion. If you're not placing, again, like I said, if you're not placing an individual in between them, then yeah, roughly 4 foot would be your minimum. But that's if you're just placing fingernails on the transmitter side, Kathy. But if you got an individual in between them, then you'll want to increase that to 6. And as just a reminder, the larger that you make the field, the stronger the field is. Okay, so with regards to the precision of the tuning, remember, like when you're turning it on, the transmitter is sending out a wave. And the moment that you start tuning and the lower that you start tuning, you're tuning the return of that signal from the receiver wave, trying to cancel out the transmitter wave, phasing the two waves. So it's not like a decimal point precision with regards to, again, like you can tune high, you can tune medium, and you can tune low. The different strengths of the fields will obviously give you a different intensity of how that scalar field reacts with your body. So, Michael, with regards to it being a healing device, it can be used for conventional cancer treatments with regards to chemo and radiation by introducing things like your medications and things like that via scalar. In addition to that, there are other medications that individuals that are under or on those protocols introduce as well, like fenbin and ivermectin that go as well, can also be introduced onto the scalar as well. But just a reminder, as we've talked about, scalars for healing modality approach. It says, can someone with a pacemaker sit in the scalar field? You should check with the manufacturer of the pacemaker. Some pacemakers will allow you to be able to tolerate certain type of interferences, but it's not encouraged. Individuals generally with this pacemaker are going to be refined to something like remote treatment. Yes, Greg, that's what I'm talking about is extending past the ideal optimal tuning range between 6.5 and 5 and finding out what the strength and intensity of your field is in your environment. 4.5, for example. Brain injuries, again, if you're healing, repairing, scalar would be amplified healing delivery, you know. But I'll remind you, like with regards to your choice of machine, amplified delivery is wonderful when you're in it, but the moment that you step out of it, you're not doing anything beneficial. So that should generally be comboed with something like a remote that can run continuously to help benefit. Zoom calls will always be recorded and made available the next day or so as soon as they're uploaded. How can I scalar iodine? There's one of two ways of doing that. You can either introduce the iodine into a small container and introduce that onto the receiver side, or you can run the molecular weight of the iodine, pipe that in via frequency into the scalar field itself. Those would be the two ways in which you could introduce scalar via iodine. Is it okay to loop regeneration frequencies overnight? I think that's what that's said, or maybe it disappeared. Yes, you can loop frequencies overnight with Scalar. And just again, I normally, if I'm running frequencies through the generator, I just hit the start and loop on the Gen X Pro and let it loop continuously as it runs Scalar, and I'll adjust it when I get up in the morning or stop. Okay, Renee, we've talked about this with regards to using fingernails as a means of turning the remote. The transmitter is an output coil. So if you're placing some DNA on that coil, it's sending the energy from that session out that coil to that DNA. Now, once that DNA is on that coil, then the quantum effect is going to work. So regardless of how far away they are, if that nail is on that receiver coil, it's feeling the effects of the benefits of that scalar session. Again, you can go BNC input to a scalar, but it's going to be recommended to use a Spooky2 generator simply because of its availability to integrate in with the frequency database. So what do we tune to then? So check your environment, Lori. As I mentioned, set up a scalar field of, let's just say 10 feet and tune it to 6.0 megahertz and see the intensity of the receiver light, and then turn it off, turn it back on and tune to 5, and check the intensity light and turn it off and turn it to 4, and check to see where your brightness levels fall. And then wherever you are, then tune to that level, put yourself into that field and see how your body responds to it. We talked about scalar in this presentation. Yes, you can imprint water in stainless steel containers. It'll imprint or pulsate right through it, no problem. Yes, okay, we talked about this. Running stroke programs for recovery with the fingernail, definitely possible with scalar. Dean, we've talked about why you put the DNA on the transmitter. That makes that a remote. Remote or scalar transmissions are not going to be harming anybody, even if you have a pig or a hard pig valve. Healing modality approach, no targeted. Boo-boo. Okay, guys, trying to get through these as quick as possible. Okay, we've talked about this with regards to certain medications that have inverse side effects. That's the benefit of being able to introduce them via scalar or via imprinting or via remote into the body, is because the body isn't going to overdose on the method of those deliveries. So you can introduce multiple means of delivery to try to trick the brain into thinking that you do not need the medication that you're doing without the risk of actually introducing the drug physically into the body. The three different shell presets, Michael, are all like there with regards to running custom shells for how you integrate in the software. If you are running Spooky2 software settings, again, like the standard presets are generally the go-to with regards to the ones that are used with regards to choice of delivery. But generally, you can choose any one of the three different shell settings, and then your choice of programs will follow with regards because of the fact that it's a shell. Okay. All right, guys. I think I have answered almost all your questions. Let me just double check, make sure I'm not missing anything else. Okay, guys. Again, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Any additional questions, please feel free to reach out and let me know. Again, I hope everybody takes care of themselves until we talk again. Take care. Bye, guys.